Okay, hello and welcome to this hurricane season outlook. Right now we are at about 5.6 east in the Atlantic, 0.2 in the Pacific, 7.4 in the Western Pacific, and 19.2 in the North Indian Ocean. Okay, let's get into the outlook. So you can see right now, right over in the Western Atlantic, right over in the Eastern Atlantic, you can see widespread warmth, very widespread warmth across the MDR. And you can also see the Caribbean seems to be running a bit above average too. Yeah, this is so just taking a look at the SST pattern, it's a pretty good indicator of an active season. Again, you have kind of a cold blotch across the subtropics, and then you have your warmer far North Atlantic, a strong Canary Current, and of course a very warm MDR, which is the most important ingredient. And so together, all these work together to create a very favorable environment for hurricanes, whether it's enhancing the West African monsoon, which this little cold tongue off Africa can do too. It's been observed well, I'll get to that later. It's been observed in other seasons, and it's often a sign of a stronger than normal African easterly jet. It can often create a pretty powerful West African monsoon, which I'll talk about later too. But so you can see a lot of signs stacking up in the East Atlantic. In the Atlantic, and we can also go take a look at the Pacific SST pattern to see what's going on over there. Okay, so you can see across the Pacific, you kind of have in the southwestern Pacific, you have just basically neutral temperatures, but in the northeast Pacific, you have maybe slightly above normal temperatures. But notice that big La Nina cold tongue, which I will talk about later too. I'm just giving you a general overview. This big warm blotch off Hawaii can often be a sign of a negative PDO, which kind of suppresses the Eastern Pacific, which can often help enhance tropical activity across the Atlantic. So definitely something to watch. Yeah, so let's just move on to our analogs here. So we have 2017, just looking at some other active seasons. We have 2017, enhanced warmth across the MDR. You can see there's also a weaker Canary Current and kind of a cooler North Atlantic. Still warm, but it's a little cooler. You can see you have that kind of staying cold blotch. You also have a little warm blotch off the East Coast, which kind of didn't really affect the season that much, even though some people predicted it could have created kind of a sinking suppression over the Caribbean, which did not happen, or at least it didn't have that much of an effect. So, taking a look, and you can also see 2017, bit colder Pacific, still warm but a bit colder. You can also see you had kind of a positive ENSO, as opposed to now when we have a negative ENSO. So let's just move on to our next analog, which I believe is 2005. Yeah, prepare to be blown away. Yeah, so you can see 2005 things were a lot more favorable than they are now. You can see much stronger African cold tongue, which really helped enhance the entire activity along the tropical areas, tropical development region, and the area where waves form. You can also see a very, very warm Western Atlantic and Eastern Atlantic as a whole. Very warm MDR, a lot warmer than now. Maybe a half a degree or so, which is a lot when you're talking about a large area. You can see the same kind of cold, a much warmer North Atlantic too. Of course, you can see the Canary Current is weaker though. So definitely 2005 was more favorable. I don't think this will be a 2005, but to see how things progress throughout the season, we could get quite an active year. which is hinting at my later prediction. You can see 2010 also. Warm MDR. You can see African cold tongue, not really there, but you do have a negative Nino, however you say that, which is pattern off the west coast of Africa, the southwest coast of Africa. And that can kind of cool down here. You can see it's negative in 2010. You can also see the PDO is a lot more negative than it is now. And of course, La Nina cool tongue is a bit more extended, but you can also see that it's a bit less focused. You can see there's a lot more warmth behind it. It's just the La Nina is progressing at about the same rate as it is 2020. You can also see very, very cold North Atlantic and a weaker than normal Canary current. Okay, next kind of analog, our final analog. So I'm just going to talk about 2013 briefly. So you can see 2013, the MDR was a lot cooler than it is now. You can also see there's just cold watches. There's no really defined NAO. If I had to choose one, I would say negative, because you can see very weak Canary current, the Canary current. Very strong Canary current, which basically cools down the MDR. That had implications later in the season. So let's skip forward to like August. You can see generally this whole area up here has warmed quite a bit more than the MDR, which basically kind of ended the season. As you can see, 2020 is a lot more favorable than 2013, which was kind of a very down year without major hurricanes, which is very, very, very rare for the Atlantic. And so let's move on to the West African monsoon. We're going to talk about that briefly. I've been mentioning our little African cold tongue. What practical effects might that be having? Or what might that be causing? Well, you can see at the moment, West Africa is a lot wetter than normal. In a tweet by Eric Weber, you can see, since May, precip has been well above average over the West African Sahel. In fact, portions of African coast have more than doubled their normal rainfall. Given La Nina, this is a very likely harbinger of an active hurricane season, and I agree with that very much. You can see very wet Sahel, which indicates that, of course, there is a lot of African easterly wave activity, which often are kind of the seeds for hurricanes, and can be a big reason behind active seasons, or a big contributor to them. And yeah. So you can see the vertical instability. Just the African easterly jet has been very strong this year. That's created very strong waves as well. So definitely something to watch as the season progresses. So we could have a very active Cape Verde season, as Weber says. So definitely something to watch. And Alex Borham, Cyclonic Wex, says he wonders if positive precip in Northwest Africa has helped to suppress the SAL on top of the suppression from the southwestward displaced monsoon trough. So in English, what that means is the monsoon trough, or basically the area where a lot of rain occurs, it might be like it's displaced to the south. So that means that it's further southward than normal. But you can also see this has helped to suppress SAL up here and kind of help create a warmer than normal Canary current, which has created rain along this coast right here. So yeah, that's my best explanation. So now we're going to move on to the ENSO, the West African monsoon. You can see the ENSO has been generally trending downwards towards negative. and that would be favorable for North Atlantic hurricane season because it can decrease vertical shear over here, this whole basin, the area where hurricanes form. So that often can lead to stronger and more storms, stronger storms that are more frequent. You can see it's been generally trending downwards. But why, you may ask? Well, let's go take a look under the hood or at the subsurface. You can see we've had a very powerful downwelling Kelvin wave, which is when the water gets, an upwelling Kelvin wave, when the waters from below the surface are pushed upwards, forced upwards from their original place, and they basically surface over the equatorial Pacific, the eastern equatorial Pacific. And so that often suppresses hurricane activity over the eastern Pacific, but it often enhances activity. And of course, over the western Pacific, it can suppress activity. But over the eastern Atlantic, and just the Atlantic as a whole, it can increase activity. And from Dr. Philip Klotzbach's Twitter, most models in the latest ENSO prediction plume are either calling for a weak La Nina or cool neutral. Example, colder than normal conditions, but not La Nina threshold. ENSO conditions for the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, August through October. So you can see this model is kind of whack. I think most models are generally agreeing on. You can see right here that we'll have a weak La Nina, which basically means that we have a La Nina that's pretty. A weak La Nina is kind of a relatively weak La Nina, because again, the negative 0.5 basically means that we've had negative 0.5 C for the past 3 months, or averaged out over the past 3 months. We've had negative 0.50 Celsius. So yeah, and that can basically help to increase Atlantic hurricane activity and decrease Eastern Pacific hurricane activity. So that's basically it. I'll give you a quick little prediction of mine. I think we could get possibly above 18 named storms, above 8 hurricanes, and above 4 major hurricanes. So yeah, as the season progresses, I think that we should definitely keep a close eye on the Atlantic hurricane season. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my outlook.